Got to get to Fulton County, Georgia. And here we go. A Georgia Court of Appeals has disqualified the Fulton County DA, Fani Willis, from that election interference case. It's coming down right now. The case against Trump and more than a dozen others already largely stalled, as you know. The new ruling means that it will be up to the prosecuting attorney's council in the state of Georgia to find another prosecutor to decide on the case, to take it over and make a decision as to whether or not they continue with a prosecution of the incoming president.
And former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo is here. John, does this mean that this is yet another one of the cases against Trump that could go away before he's president?
It's another example, Dana, of this lawfare campaign that was waged by Democrats, boomeranging back on them and falling all around their ears. Anyone who watched this trial, remember, this is the DA who claimed that the entire Trump reelection campaign was something like an organized crime racket that was intending to deprive everyone of our civil rights to vote. But remember, we saw the dramatic testimony over the summer of how DA Fani Willis had hired her boyfriend, essentially, to be the special counsel, overpaid him, and then had him investigate and bring charges against Donald Trump. It's a complete conflict of interest. And if you take a quick look at the Georgia Appeals Court decision here, that's what it says. There's such an appearance of impropriety, an appearance of a conflict of interest, that Fani Willis should not be the prosecutor. I think this spells yet another case that's going to have to either be suspended or more likely just ended and tossed out. It's hard for me to see another Georgia district attorney wanting to take up this flawed case and try to prosecute Trump on these theories that his reelection campaign was some kind of criminal organized crime enterprise.
John, a couple of things here. There are 14 others that face charges. I don't know what happens to them, but she can appeal to the state Supreme Court in Georgia. But given what the Supreme Court said in Washington about immunity, I mean, does the state Supreme Court even take her case in Georgia?
It's a good question, Bill. I think what's going to happen here, along the lines of possible appeals and so on, is it looks likely, because of that presidential immunity decision by the Supreme Court, that any kind of state prosecution of President Trump would have to be at least suspended, if not dropped. You're seeing that going on, those arguments going on right now up in New York City with the case being heard by Judge Merchan. So even if they could get past immunity, they'd still have to suspend it while President Trump was in office. But furthermore, you'd have to go back and then scrub the whole indictment, scrub everything the grand jury did, and say you've got to eliminate anything that used official actions by President Trump, any evidence that came in from White House officials, from anything the president was doing in the Oval Office. That might actually fatally handicap this prosecution and require the whole thing to be dismissed.
It's interesting, too, because she had this novel way of trying to get at him through RICO. Was that a mistake as well? In addition to her personal behavior, obviously, is what they're saying here. But in a way, it was this like novel idea, like, how can I be the one to take Trump down? That's for, like, politically, she wanted that reputation.
Yeah. Dana, you and I remember we're Justice Department alums. Yeah, I remember you when you were there and I was there and we were, there after the days of 9/11. And you can use this kind of statute, RICO, to try to go after real organized crime, drug cartels, mafia organizations. DA Fani Willis introduced, I think, a really dangerous theory, was that we could use these powerful tools that are used for terrorists and drug cartels and apply them to political campaigns, and not just any political campaign, but the campaign by the leading opposition candidate at that time, Donald Trump, the head of one of the two major parties in the country. I think ultimately the whole thing would have been tossed out because it violated the free speech rights of Donald Trump, the free speech rights of the Republican Party, and actually a lot of Americans who supported him. So I think in the end, this whole thing was going to come crashing down around Fani Willis's and the Democratic Party's ears anyway.
Well, it seemed complicated from the beginning. There is that case here in New York that's still out there, the 34 counts in Judge Merchan's courtroom. He made a ruling about a week ago that the conviction still stands, but the penalty will be judged at a later date. John, do you think that later date ever happens now?
I think this is Judge Merchan really still trying to go after Donald Trump. Think about it. If you look, Bill, you mentioned the presidential immunity case. There's a footnote, a really important footnote in that opinion that says states, even if they're prosecuting a president for private acts, can't use evidence from the presidency. They can't use what Donald Trump said in the Oval Office. They can't use what White House officials said. Nevertheless, Judge Merchan went ahead and held a trial and introduced that kind of evidence. He should, at the very least, order a new trial, if not force a DA to go back to it. But what Merchan is doing, which I think is still dangerous, is he's dangling these charges still, the sentencing, over the head of Donald Trump and saying, well, I can't sentence you now. Maybe I won't. He still probably, he could try to get in before the inauguration, but he shouldn't. But he's going to say, I'm going to dangle that over your head for the next 4 years, and I'm going to be waiting for you when your presidency is over.
Well, you have to think he's doing the work of Alvin Bragg, right, Dana? At the moment. I mean, he works for the DA, right, John?
I don't know.
I won't say he's doing. I'm sure Bragg loves this idea because Bragg is trying to make his career out of harassing President Trump. And this is a terrible thing for not just Donald Trump, for all Americans because of the presidency. You don't want presidents to have to try to make the toughest decisions on behalf of the country and have to worry what's going to happen to me when I come out of office. Is this, two-bit judge and this DA are going to be able to have
clear decision making. Indeed, John, you stick around for a moment. We have some other breaking news. Bill.
Yeah. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.